All right, so before we get started with today's lecture, I just want to take like a pulse check here. How confident are people starting to feel in Django right now? Is it starting to feel like something that makes sense, or is it still kind of a mystery at this point?
I think there are a few methods that I'm still trying to figure out like the magic behind, but overall, like the structure makes sense.
All right, yeah, that's good. Yeah, there's certain things that I still don't understand about how Django works, but I know how to make it. But I know how to make it work, as it were. So that's a feeling, that never really goes away, I think, because as long as we use tools that other people make, there's going to be stuff in it that we don't understand. All of Django's source code is open. You can look at it uh, if you ever want to actually see what the code that makes it work is. Uh, I wouldn't get it, but maybe you would, because a lot of you I know are smarter than me. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be making a Django application from scratch. And so I'm going to be giving it full CRUD capabilities: create, read, update, and destroy. I'm also going to add some styling to it from Bootstrap. And I'm going to be talking about Django templating, which is a way of decreasing your workload by allowing you to essentially reuse HTML code. We're also going to be talking about Django's built-in admin panel as well. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to first start a new project. Start project, my site. What did I do wrong here? Django admin, start project, my site. Oh boy, that's interesting. No such file or directory. That hasn't happened to me before. I'm gonna try going up a level and trying it again, see if this changes anything. No? All right, so I've got a interesting problem with Django admin. I don't know how that could have changed. 1 second. Sorry about this. This doesn't usually come up, but I'm going to have to do some troubleshooting here. So it says bad interpreter, no such file or directory. I'm going to copy this, put it into Google. What the? Let's try that again. Copy. No such file or directory in Django admin. Let's see what this can tell me. All right, now Google's giving me trouble. All right, here we go. All right, so this looks like what I'm getting. First used to change user local bin Django admin py to shebang to that. All right, so let's try setting up a virtual environment first. So I'm going to try setting up a virtual environment and reinstalling Django there and see if that helps me out. And then I'm going to pip install Django.
Shouldn't you activate your virtual environment before you pip install?
You are absolutely right. I should have done that. Well, looks like I'm installing Django on my main machine as well, which isn't a problem. I still need Django there, even though, okay, it's successfully installed. Now I'm going to actually activate my virtual environment and do it again, just in case. fine. All right, let's try again. Django admin start project. My site. Come on. All right, cool. That seemed to work that time. So I'm navigating in. All right, I need to make sure I'm going back into my virtual environment. Bin, activate. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to make a blog app in my Django project. So Python manage.py, start app, we'll call it blog. So now as you see, I've got my usual Django skeleton all set up here. So in my models, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to create a class called post. Inherits from models.model. And we'll say a post has an author. In this case, it's going to be models.foreign key. Oh my God. Models.foreign key. And I'm going to import something from Django.conf import settings, because I'm going to get something called an auth user model. So this allows me to essentially use a built-in class that Django already has. And we'll say on delete equals models.cascade. So this will essentially set up a author user model for me automatically. Then I'm going to say title equals models.char field, max length equals 200. We'll say text equals models.text field, and publish date equals models.datetime field. And we'll say blank equals true, so it's allowed to be blank. And also null equals true. So it's not going to be a problem. This is going to be a completely optional field. There we go. I'm also going to make a str method that's just going to return self.title. Now if I try to make a migration, let's see what happens if it works. So make migrations blog. Uh-oh. All right, so I made an error here. What did I do wrong?
Does that need to be in your URLs?
So I don't think we haven't really gotten to URLs yet, but there is something I'm missing. I forgot to add to the project.
Is
Sorry,
it
I
a
said
start
that
app?
wrong. The settings thing.
Yeah, so I need to go to settings and make sure that my blog app is one of the installed apps. So if I do that, save and make migrations again, now it has successfully created a migration. All right, so now I'm going to add another thing to this we haven't done before. So it's a cool feature of Django that they have a built-in administrative dashboard to CRUD models to the database. So in the past, we were using the Shell Plus, but there's a GUI we can activate as well that makes it a little bit easier if we want to interact with our database directly. So I'm going to go to admin.py here. I'm going to say from.models, we're going to import our post model. And then I'm going to say admin.site.register post. So that this line essentially says that we are adding the post model to our admin ability. Now I'm going to manage.py and migrate. And then I'm going to run the server. So now if I go to localhost 8000/admin, you can see I have a login page to the Django administration page. So we don't have but we can't actually log in yet because we don't have a username or a password. To do that, we need to create something called a server, a super user. So I'm going to stop the server. I'm going to run python manage.py create super user. And I'll leave this blank to just use Noah Heinrich. I'll say noah@codeplatoon.org. Password 123456. You have to type it again. 123456. Never actually do. Oh, in fact, it doesn't even let me do that. It's too short. It has to be at least 8 characters. It's too common and it's entirely numeric. So Django is already on the lookout for saying, hey, this is a really bad password. You shouldn't use it. It will let me do that, even let me use it though if I just hit Y. So I am going to do that because I don't really care about security right now. So it says right now I have successfully created my super user. So I'm going to run the server one more time. Refresh the page. Username is Noah Heinrich. Password is 123456. And as you can see, I've got this cool administrative panel right here. And it's already got some things added. It's got my blog with posts. It's also got authentication and authorization thing, including users and groups. Some things I didn't really have to write. These were already built into Django. What questions do you have about what we did to get to this point?
No, it was on one of your pages in VS Code. You wrote under the post auth, under models, the foreign key, the settings.auth user model. Is
Yes.
that authorization or author?
Authorization.
Okay, and so is that what you just did?
Yep. So that's what allows this user thing to exist right here. And if I click on this, I can see there's already a user here registered. It's got a username, an email address, a first name and a last name, and staff status. So this is a built-in thing that Django has. So if I don't want to write my own user model.
Great, thank you.
No problem. All right. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
So you don't need to create a users table at all, is what you're saying here?
If you don't want to, no.
Okay.
It's again one of those things where if you want to use Django's built-in users users class, you can. You just don't get much control over what it's like. You know, if I don't want to include this stuff, first name, last name, and staff status, then you know that would be included whether I want it or not. So sometimes you'll want to write your own model, and I believe there's also a way to use inheritance to essentially get some of the functionality from the Django auth user model without having to, you know, essentially rely on it entirely.
Got it.
So now I'm going to use this administrative panel to add some posts to my database. And you'll notice that I'm just using the SQLite database here. I'm not using Postgres this time because I don't feel like it. So say Django is so fun. Text. It is a great thing to use if you want to make a website quickly.
So Noah, I noticed that this is a much more user-friendly interface than entering these posts in the shell and saving them and such. Are we done with the shell? Is this the new shell, or should we keep knowing how to do that?
I think it's still important to know how to use the shell. The shell gives you access to more powerful ways of searching, but this is also an option. So this isn't a replacement for the shell. This is something you can use in addition to the shell.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm gonna but it does give me this today and now thing. I can hit save and add another. Counterpoint Django isn't fun. I hate it, it stinks. And add one more. Why aren't we talking about Rails? Because we're not doing Ruby. Hit save. So now I've got 3 posts in my database to work with. All right. So that's a way of us being able to make sure our database is populated before we actually have CRUD functionality. So now I'm going to start adding some URLs. So I'm going to make sure that in my urls.py in the project level, I'm going to import path and also include. And you can see that the admin path has already been added to our URLs without us having to do anything. That's by default. So I'm going to add path to post/. We're going to include blog.urls, which doesn't currently exist, so we need to make it. New file, urls.py. I'm going to say from Django.urls import path, and from dot import views. And say URL patterns equals a list with path. This is going to be our post/ without anything after it. Will take us to views.postList, which we haven't written yet. We're going to give it the name of post list. And then we got to go to our views.py. And we need to first import from .models. We need to import our post class. And then we're going to make a method called postList, which takes a request as an argument. We're first going to get all of our posts using post.objects. And we're going to use .order by published date. And then we're going to return render with request to blog/postlist.html. And we're going to give it as information posts with our posts. And
No,
then
I think you forgot an S on from models or dot model. I think it's.
Oh, thank you. All right. And now we need to actually make sure we have our HTML file that we can actually render things from. So again, I'm going to create a new folder here. I'm going to call this one templates. Inside templates, I'm going to make another folder called blog. And inside blog, I'm going to make a file called postlist.html. And now that I'm here, I'm going to create just a very simple home page that displays all of our blogs. So I'm going to have a heading here. Inside the heading, I'm going to have, heading is going to be kind of my, I'm going to have a link. So I'm going to use an A here. I'm going to say href equals. And inside of that, I'm going to put my little % signs here. URL is going to be post list. And it's going to say my blog. And then I'm going to loop through my list of posts. So for post in posts, then I'm going to have a div. Inside each div is going to be an h2. And we're going to have a link right here. href equals, and it's not going to link to anything just yet. I'm just going to have it linked to post.title. And then I'm going to have a p tag here that's going to say published. It's going to show post.published-date. And then another p tag. And we're going to say post.text line breaks BR, which will essentially say, okay, if you have line breaks in the text of your post, it'll stop next time it hits one. And then at the end of this, I'm going to have my end 4. So now, if I visit localhost/8000/posts, I should see a home page with a home page.
I think
Ah.
you maybe missed a brace, a closing brace on line 9.
You're right, thank you. There we go. So you can see I've got this link up here, which just leads back to the page I'm on. And I've got my 3 links here. One goes, and each one of these will eventually lead to the view page for each of these. But for now, it's just a link that goes nowhere. Great. What questions do you have about doing our index page like this?
On the line breaks VR part of the code, where do you find stuff like that? Is that in the Django documentation, or would that be like in a Python? Like what documentation would you find that from?
This is a Django thing, I believe. So I do line breaks BR. Let's see what happens. So yeah, this is in the Django documentation under built-in template tags and filters. So they have all sorts of stuff you can use. Line breaks BR says converts all new lines into place of plain text of HTML to HTML line breaks. So okay, so I was wrong about what it does. So it essentially says if you have a \n, it'll put that as a HTML BR here. So instead of just doing a new line character, it'll actually use an HTML tag. So yeah, if you're ever curious about what kind of templating options Django has, it looks like this link right here, I'll put it in Slack, is useful for that. And like we've said before, Django has amazing documentation compared to many other coding languages and frameworks. So be sure to take advantage of that. All right. What other questions do you have? Okay. In that case, we've got a functional index page here, but it's hideous. So let's add some styling to that. So I'm going to add a head up here. In the head, I'm going to include some links to Bootstrap. I'm just copying and pasting from another window right now. And then if I want to add my own CSS, I'm going to create a new folder. And this one is going to be called static. Inside static, I'm going to make another folder called CSS. And then I'm going to make a file called blog.css.
Is that where JavaScript would go to?
I believe so, yes. You'd have a static JS folder, if I'm not mistaken. All right. So inside my CSS, I'm going to have, I want to say, all of the links inside of an h1 or an h2 tag. I'm going to say h1a and h2a. I'm going to give them a new color. That color is going to be C25100. Is a cool, nice little burnt umber color. And then in the body, I'm going to say padding left is now going to be 15 pixels. In order to connect our post list HTML to this CSS file, I need to do something a little different. So first off, I'm going to wrap everything here inside an HTML tags.
What does that do? I mean, it seems like it already knew that it was HTML.
So it normally knows that, but the thing I need to do has to be outside of the HTML tags. So that's what. So I'm adding this here, so I can up here put load static.
Got it.
And then once I've loaded static, I can down here say, I want a link rel equals style sheet. href equals, I'm going to say here, static css/blog.css, like so.
Is there a
So-
difference between loading static and just writing the path in the href?
For one thing, this is kind of the way, this is the Django way, as it were. And it also allows you to do this in case you have, move things around. You don't need to figure out the relative path from here. You don't need to say .. /static/static/css/blog.css. So this way is a little bit, it's a faster way of doing it in terms of how much you have to write. Because when you get larger file structures like this, your relative paths can get pretty torturous. So it's good to have these shortcuts here. Let's see if I refresh my page. There we go. So this looks a bit better than it did before, I would say. I'm also going to, let me see here.
I think the padding didn't work. Is there
Yeah,
a
I
reason
was gonna
for
say
that?
too.
Let's take a look. So if I inspect this, I should be able to take a look at the style here. So I should see padding left, if I can find it. So here's that text color stuff. And a lot of this comes from Django, actually. You can see Django actually has, sorry, not Django. Bootstrap has kind of overridden my color selection and stuff like that as well. And actually, now I'm looking at it, I'm not seeing my styling at all.
You know, I learned this through trial and error. Sometimes if you add a style sheet, you have to kill the server and start it again
Ah.
for it to work. I was
All right,
messing around with it.
So I'll restart the server, see if that makes a difference. There we go. That's better. Yeah. So this time it worked. You're right. Sometimes you got to restart the server in order for the style sheet to exist there. All right. So I'm going to add some more. I'm going to make this even more bootstrappy by using some of Bootstrap's built-in things. And these are things I've learned through trial and error here. So I'm going to give this top div a class. A class equal to page header. And again, these are built-in Bootstrap classes. And up here, I'm going to add one div. This one's going to have a class, two classes. One is content and one is container. Inside that, we're going to have a div, a class called row. And inside of that, I'm going to have a div with a class called call md8. And then I'm going to copy all of this here and put it inside this one right there, like so. And I'm going to give some of these their own classes as well. So this is going to have a class called post. And I'm actually going to put the publish date above the title this time. I'm going to put it inside its own div with a class of date. Like so. So this is, again, using some built-in Bootstrap stuff. Refresh the page. So looks a bit better. It's still got some stuff I'm not a big fan of. It's hard to tell which one belongs to what. So in blog, I'm going to go back to blog.css and change a few things around. So I'm going to say page header. I'm going to change the background color to one I know, C2. I'm going to change this one to C25100. Background color, not background. I'm going to give it a margin on top of 0. I'm going to change the padding to have 20 pixels, 20 pixels, 20 pixels and on all sides and 40 pixels on the bottom. All right, I should probably change the text color as well. Let's make the color of the text white.
I think if you put 40 pixels in the last one, that's the left side, if I'm
Oh,
not mistaken.
you're right. All right. All right, I'm going to add some other stuff. I'm going to say, let's see here. I want my content class, margin left of 40 pixels. I'm going to change the .date class to have a different color. I'm going to have this one be 828282, more of a gray color, like so. Okay, that looks a little bit better. I'm also going to change the HTML a bit. I'm going to put between each of these, I'm going to put a HR, horizontal rule. There we go. Now there's kind of more of a distinguishing thing between each of them. All right, so this is a lot better, looking a lot better already than it was before. Still not perfect, but it looks, like something I can be a little more proud of rather than just vanilla HTML. What questions do you have about styling?
When you do the, can I see your CSS?
Yes.
I'm sorry, not the CSS, the HTML.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do the row, what is the row and the column medium 8?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Bootstrap has a way of adding things. It's got its own grid system. And I know CSS now has something called CSS Grid. It didn't have that for a long time, so Bootstrap and other frameworks were like kind of the only game in town for that. And so I believe Bootstrap essentially says each row that you'd establish has 12 columns. And I'm telling this div here to take up 8 of these columns in medium size. And so you can also say large, extra large, small, depending on essentially the size of the display. So if I wanted to have another column, some more content alongside this, I would give it a class of col medium 4, I believe. So if I did Not sure how well this would work. Let me try it. So if I do div here and say class equals call mid 4. I believe I am in the right row for that because yeah, still inside. Am I still inside the row, or am I outside of it? Sorry, one sec. I'm losing track of all my divs. Okay, I think this is the right place. Now we just do, H2 here. It's content. Let's see how that looks. So this allows me to put this stuff alongside this thing in the same row, as opposed to automatically putting it beneath this, the way HTML does if you leave it to its own devices.
Does it break if you have columns that add up to more than 12?
Let's see what happens. If I do 10 here, yeah, it overflows and gets put on the bottom. So got to keep those limits in mind and make sure that you're not exceeding, I'm pretty sure it's 12 columns per row. Great. What other questions do you have about CSS?
Can you show me one more time where you're connecting this HTML to your CSS file, your blog.css?
Yeah.
That's all at the top there.
Yeah, so I've got this line here that says load static, which loads this static folder. And then down here I'm saying, okay, get me a path. My href is the static folder. Inside of that, there's a CSS folder with blog.css.
Okay.
And this is just a way of, circumventing the relative path stuff, because otherwise we have to do .. / static / css / blog.css.
And can you do that with like any file, or do you only want to do that to the static folder and put everything you want to use in the static folder?
I have only used it with the static folder. I'm not with the static folder. I imagine there is a way to do it to other files as well, or other folders as well. But so I'm not sure. It's worth experimenting with, but this is the primary use case as far as I know.
So stuff like images and videos and other media that you need to put in your website would all be in their like separate folder?
So in static is also where you include things like images, JavaScript files, audio media, things like that. If it's not coming from an outside source, then it would probably live in the static folder. All right, what other questions?
I don't know if it's a good question, but does the static folder need to be called static, or we could just name it something we want?
Good question. It's again one of those things that is considered, I'm blanking on the word now. It's like kind of the standard practice. I imagine that as long as you are consistent with names, it would still work. But other developers of Python will be looking for a static folder. So it's good to keep these things in mind, because there may be some built-in things that I don't know about that Django's relying on for that to be called a static folder. And even if it doesn't have any built-in reasons, it's still there to make sure that all Django developers are kind of speaking the same language. All right, so I have a question for everybody right now. So now on this page, I've got my style sheet stuff here. I've got this page header, which is, includes a link, and I'll probably want that on every page I have. Am I going to have to do this every time on every HTML document I make? I'd have to include, load static, head, link to bootstrap, all of that. That doesn't seem very dry, does it? So in order to get around that, we're going to be using something called templating. So templating is a way of kind of writing HTML and CSS one time and using it and applying it to other files and pages so that you don't have to write it again every single time. So like if you visit a page like Amazon, every page essentially has similar stuff at the top and the bottom of the page. There's always the navigation bar and stuff at the bottom. And it doesn't make sense for them to say, okay, every single page on Amazon, we need to write the same HTML and CSS for. So instead they use a templating system to put the header and footer on everything before they have to write the middle section. So one way of thinking of it is kind of like a form letter. You know, you've probably all gotten form letters from a company or an employer where it's just, you know, it's a templated letter and it substitutes in your name at the top. They don't actually, you know, write different letters for every new person. They just, you know, copy and paste names. So we're going to extend this concept to Django. So inside of blog, in order to do this, I'm going to make a new file. And I'm going to call this one base.html. Inside base.html, I'm actually going to copy all of the content from here. Put it in. And I'm just going to get rid of all of the stuff except for the load static, the head, and the page header. Actually, sorry, I'm going to get rid of everything inside of all of the stuff that puts the posts. So all the stuff inside the for loop. But I'm going to keep the row and the column medium 8. And then inside of that, I'm going to write something here called block content and end block. And this is essentially a placeholder for whatever HTML we decide to load into this base.html. And then back in post list, I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff up here and all of this down here. So we just have our for loop. Yeah. All right. Want to format this document. All right, never mind. That's not going to work. Don't worry about it. I'll do that later. Up at the top, I'm going to say extends blog/base.html. And then I'm going to say block content. So I'm defining everything inside here as block content. And say end block here. So if we did this right, our page should look exactly the same. So I'm just saying, okay, inside of here, there's going to be block content. And then over here, I'm saying it extends blog/base.html. And here's the block content that's going to go inside that template. Refresh the page. It looks the same, which means we did it right.
Can we check out your base.html one more time, please?
Definitely.
So you don't call, so like if you had more than just one page, I guess I kind of expected that on this base page you would like have to put in the name of the page you want in the block content, and you would just put several names. But it looks like it works the opposite direction, where on your post list page you say wrap all of this stuff in whatever is on the base page.
Yeah, I'm essentially saying telling post list HTML here that you are going to be wrapped around, like you are the content that gets wrapped inside of base HTML.
Cool. That's better than writing them each separately.
Mhm. So this means that we'd have to write less HTML and CSS for our other pages, which we are going to do shortly. Because right now, we've got an index page with no actual functionality. These links don't go anywhere. So to do that, I am going to make use of one of Django's URL helpers that we kind of saw already when we created this URL goes to post list. So here I've got my href that goes to a post title, and I want to say here, I'm going to have URL goes to something called post detail, which we haven't defined yet. We're going to say post ID is going to equal posts.id. And then we need to make sure that this URL actually exists in our urls.py. I'm going to say path. And our link to our URL is going to look like this, int post ID. That'll go to views.postDetail. We're going to give it the name of post detail. Sorry, got to put the that in the wrong place. There we go. And then we need to add a helper method in views. Nope. Called post detail, which has a request post detail, which takes in a request and a post ID. I'm going to say post equals post.objects.get, where ID equals post ID. And we're going to return render request. We're going to blog/postdetail.html, which is another thing we haven't made yet. And we're going to be passing in post like so.
You missed a comma in the arguments, Noah.
Yes, I did. Thank you. And then finally, I'm going to make our post detail.html page. And we're going to make sure we extend the blog template. So extends blog/base.html. Let's make sure we get all of our CSS there. We can have our block content. Make sure we have end block. One day I'll be able to type right. And inside here, I'm going to have a div class equals post. I'm going to say if the post has a published date. I'm going to make sure I have my end if. So if it does have that, we're going to have a div with a class equal date with post.published date. And then here we're going to have an h2. Wow. With our post.title. And then a p tag with our post.text with line breaks br. So now if I refresh the page, if I take a look here, we can see at the bottom, the URL is pointing to localhost 8000/post/1/2 and /3. If I click on this link, it takes me to this page, which still has the my blog at the top and the styling here that I asked for. And so again, kind of going back to post list, one thing that helps us do that is this URL helper that's built into Django that says, all right, I want the href for this link is a URL. It goes to the URL called post detail, which we defined in urls.py. And we're giving it the post ID of this post's ID. So this automatically formats the URL for us without having to hard code in / go to this / post/post.id. What questions do you have about the view page that we just made?
If you use the Django admin tool to write the post into your database, if you just use like enter to do the line breaks, does the line breaks BR, the Django UI convert that into a or the /n?
Good question.
And then line breaks converts that into the HTML tag? Is that how that works?
I'm not sure. We can test it out. So if I go to localhost 8000 /admin, add a post called line breaks. This is a line break. Hit save. So if I click here, let's see what it displays. So it still shows it like this. So how would I see how it looks in the database itself? I might have to do something like be Python, Django. Oh, I would need to add shell plus to this, wouldn't I? No. I'm going to start the server again one more time. And first I'm going to see, okay, did this work the way it's supposed to? So if I go back here, refresh the page. So it did work here, but I'm not sure where well, I guess we can install shell plus so we can actually take a look at what it looks like inside the database. Because yeah, that is as we can see, it's a problem with Django admin as opposed to the shell. Is it shows us this, it doesn't actually show us the raw data. If we want that, we got to go to, so I'd say pip install Django extensions.
Would you be able to see it if you inspected it on the web page?
I'm sorry?
Would you be able to see it if you inspected it on the web page itself?
Mm-hmm. That would show me what gets rendered to the page, yes. So if I inspect this, oh yeah, it'll either show us BRs or something else. Good point. Ah, yeah, so it does have BRs here. But while I'm here, I'm still going to go to settings.py, and I'm going to add Django extensions. Be Python manage.py shell plus, if I'm not mistaken. No module named Django
I think it's just
extension.
shell.
Well, looks like, okay, no module found called Django extensions. All right, so if I do post.objects.all, all right, so post is not defined, so I think it is shell plus in this case. There we go. Wait, no, shell underscore plus. All right, so now if I do post.objects.all, okay, now if I do post.objects.last, what do we call it in model? Was the text? It gives us line, so it goes also \r/\n. So it's a bit of a long road to answer that question, but yes, that is what happens.
Sorry, what is the R?
So I believe it's just putting \r\n is a different type of line break. I don't remember exactly what the difference is between that and a \n on its own. I believe it is. Let's take a look at that. \r\n. Let's see what that. Oops. r\n.
I think the R is a return carriage.
Yeah, so we can, yep. So it's a carriage return, i.e. move the cursor to the left. While \n on its own is a new line only. All right, good questions. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. I meant to restart the server. All right, so we've got a little more to do because we need to make sure that we can add, edit, and delete our posts. But we've been at this for almost an hour now, so let's take a 10-minute break. So be back at 10:34, and then we'll move on to the second part of this lecture.